It's true. Yeah, my mother-in-law married at the age of 14, let's say 100 years ago. So, she got years ago at the age of 12.
Yeah, it was completely normal to get married then.
That makes sense. The age of 10, it's a little long.
Yeah, so there's different Pirushim given, different Mefarshim attempt different answers for what exactly went on and why he waited, why he was willing to work 7 years. Okay.
Yaakov. Yaakov was 63.
When he got married, he was already 84.
And nowadays,
Okay, we're ready to continue. Okay. We all know what happened, that he was tricked. We're going to read from Sefer Yashar some of the details of this famous wedding. So, it's written in Sefer Kabbalah that the wedding actually was a Friday day wedding, and the consummation of the wedding occurred on Friday night of Shabbos. Sefer Yashar writes as follows. At the end of the 7th year of Yaakov's service, in which he served Lavan, Yaakov Lavan Tnos Ishti Kamal Yamavidas Yaslav K. The Yosef Lavan Yaakov is called Anshe Amakamahu. Yasula Mishta Yaakov invited all of his friends. Lavan invited all of his friends, and they decided to make a wedding party. Iba Erev, Vayav Lavan Alabaisha, Yaakov Shamani Manshe Mishta. It came nighttime, and all the guests of the wedding knew exactly what was going on here, and this was one big trick. That they kept silent and didn't tell anything to Yaakov. After the wedding and the chuppah, they all went to Yaakov's house and they ate, they drank. Yaakov and rejoiced and danced. They had tupim and mecheles, dancing in circles and musical instruments, and they were singing the whole time a song of Hilela, Hilela. Yaakov Hilela, Hilela. Yaakov heard this strange song. He didn't know what it means. Maybe this is the current language way of singing, Mazel Tov or something. Kachel mishpat and lasus beretz hazais. Vayidabru ameron kadabes akol alaylahu. And the whole night they were singing this song. And no lights again. All the lights were still off. Vayiba boiker, came the daytime. Vayor hayoim, and the day shone. Vayifen Yaakov es ishtoi, and Yaakov turns to his newlywed wife we worked 7 years for, and he's like, "Who are you?" Vayar b'nei Leah shechavas beheki, he sees Leah sleeping there in the bed. And then Yaakov said, "After you do it now," retroactively, I understand their song. They were saying, "Hi Leah, yemu v'ani leyadati," and I did not. So as we know, Yaakov came with complaints to his father-in-law, Lavan, telling him, "Mama rimi sani," and he was told back, that's not the derech how we do things here. We first marry off the older, it was Leah, and then Rachel, and of course, some say after 7 years, some say after 7 days, he ended up marrying both Rachel and Leah. We're going to read a few more interesting mefarshim from different midrashim of what happened here in the story. So first, as we know, that Yaakov Avinu had foreseen the possibility of this occurring, and specifically because of that reason, he handed over that and thereby avoid the ability of Lavan to trick him into marrying somebody else. So as we know, Rachel went ahead and gave over the Simanim to Leah. A few questions here. First of all, the basics, just interesting out of curiosity. What were the Simanim? What were those secret code words that were handed over? And number two, what was Rachel thinking? Why did Rachel do this? Why did Rachel basically she messed Yaakov over? She's the one that she could have said and stopped this whole thing from happening. So what exactly was she thinking when she did this? So regarding the first question of what was in the Simanim, what were the Simanim? So Sifrei Kabbalah, beginning with the Chesed Avram and Yaakov Ruveni, they bring us some of the details of what happened, of what the Simanim were. Yaakov Avinu handed over to Rachel something which is not really well known today, but it does have precedence in the Torah regarding other halachas, and that is how to get rid of the evil spirits prior to consummating a marriage or prior to intimacy. And he told her the following: you need to tell me what I'm teaching you now, which is the secret Kabbalistic method of how to, as I said before, prepare the holiness of the environment of during marital intimacy, so that everything is completely kaddish v'tov, everything's completely holy and pure. How is that done? So it's interesting. It says by touching the right thumb of the right foot, touching the big toe of the right foot, the thumb of the right hand, and the right earlobe. Now, if any of you recollect, where is this from in the Torah? Where do we find this?
You put on when they were inaugurating the
Mitzayra and the Levium.
Levium.
We found this by the Levium. We find this by Mitzayra. That when you had to purify Mitzayra, you would touch these three parts with blood and with oil. So by the Levites, these three parts, these three areas, the right earlobe, the right thumb of the hand, and the big toe of the foot, of the right foot, were all touched. What's the reason behind it? Ever think about that? What's going on here? Putting oil and blood in these places. Explanation is that it's explained in these Svarim is that those areas have a certain achiza, they have a certain nurture from the Yetzer Hara, they have a certain nurture from the evil side, from the klippus. And being that intimacy is something that naturally involves the Yetzer Hara, the inclination, so it's important to purify it and refine it as much as possible. And that is done through touching those areas.
Who touches?
The woman touches the man's. Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is done, but this was the simon that he gave her. So, to touch those three areas. Again, this is not widely practiced today, for whatever reason or not. People, I guess, don't know. I mean, it's not found in the classical Sfarim. It's Chesed Avram. It's not a secret that everybody learns. But so this is the simon that he handed over to Leah, and Leah did the simanim. Everyone's looking under the chuppah, so what's going on? He's touching his toe. He's touching his earlobe. This is a weird way to start a marriage. But she was handing him over the simanim that she got. So Yaakov thought, good, this is it. The reason why Yaakov couldn't just simply lift up the veil and look, first of all, we said it was nighttime. It was nighttime and there was no lights, but also it's brought down that Leah and Rachel were twins, and they had similar figures. Kind of contradicts what it says in the Psukim that one was beautiful and the other was Raka, but nonetheless, that's a perplexion. Perplexion of the person can be, different based on many other things. It's not only the physical looks. So, bottom line is that he was, with all those things put together, he was convinced that this was Rachel, and he continued to consummate the marriage. What was Rachel thinking, we asked? Why did she agree to give the simanim? So the first thing is that, as we said, she didn't want to embarrass her sister, but that's not enough of an answer because this was Leah's choice. Leah shouldn't have decided to trick Rachel's future husband.
Well, she hadn't been listening to her father, or else.
Or else what?
That wasn't good kind.
So you're saying maybe she was fearful for her life.
Yeah.
We all know Leah was in this head-in. She wanted to marry Yaakov. She was with Lavan on this. Sure. She wasn't a forced woman. Let's not change the storyline here. She wasn't a battered daughter who was forced under the chuppah because of her father and she feels so bad. This was not the story. This is a woman who was wishing to marry Yaakov Avinu. Don't forget, her whole life was brought up thinking that she would be married to Esau, and she did not want that to happen. So she was a very willing participant in this, what we can call love and scam. And so we're not asking the questions on her. She was in desperation. She wanted to marry the tzaddik. Okay, but what about Rachel?
Maybe Rachel didn't.
Why didn't she have a choice? Of course she had a choice. Don't give the simanim. What's going to happen to you? Nothing's going to happen. Lavan didn't know anything about that. They would have no idea how Yaakov figured out the trick, that he was being tricked. They wouldn't have known. It would have been just between Rachel and him. Nobody would have known. So while this doesn't completely answer the question, one explanation that's brought is that Rachel saw that Yaakov would for sure marry her, no matter what. She envisioned that. So being that she's not losing, Yaakov's not really losing her as a wife, and she's not losing him as a husband. It's just temporarily, according to some opinions, 1 week of another wait. They waited 7 years, 1 more week of the wait. So the condition was not that Leah cannot be given to him, that he wants Rachel, so he's going to get. Anyways, Rachel foresaw that she would marry him, so she didn't feel as bad giving Simonim in order to save her sister. So this was a real, this was, even though it kind of, as we said before, backstabbed Yaakov, went against his wishes, but it was for the sake of saving her sister from embarrassment, saving her sister from needing to marry a Russia. And this is why it's brought down in the Medrash that when we prayed by Rachel's grave, and one of the reasons why Rachel's prayer is so accepted before Hashem is because she uses this story as bait to get Hashem to answer her prayers. As she tells Hashem, look at what I did for my sister. I entered a tzara labesi. I entered a co-wife into my home, and I had a way of avoiding it, and I decided to give it to her and have mercy in order to make peace, in order for her to benefit. So certainly you should also open up your hands for your children. So this is something that Rachel is now, known for, that she's able to use to request mercy on behalf of us. The next morning, you can imagine that what we read in Sefer Yashar, he woke up, he saw it's Leah. There must have been a conversation that went on there. It wasn't just like, oh, it's Leah. Now I know what they sang last night. It must have been a kind of tough conversation that went on. He was not a happy camper. Yaakov Avinu could not have been a happy camper. So the Medrash Tanchuma and other Midrashim further elaborate on this. They say the following.
They were little girls. They were still little girls both of them.
The maturity back then was, like 50 years ago, a 10-year-old of then was like a 30-year-old of today. So they were mature. They were very mature already. Okay, I'm just opening up here to the Medrash, and we're going to read it. Okay, this is from the Medrash Tanchuma. He woke up in the morning, he sees it's Leah. He says to her, Lama rimisani, why did you do this to me? Why did you fool me? You're just like your father who fooled me. You are just like Lavan who fooled me. Why did you do this? Amrlai, she said to him, you're one to talk. Why did you fool your father? Suddenly we can't fool anymore.
He never said that to Rachel because she's a part of the flock. He didn't say those words to Rachel.
Lama Misani, of course not. No, he didn't.
He did because she was an accomplice.
True. But what the Medrash says that this was the morning conversation. Okay? So she says back, what a way to start a marriage, huh? Why did you fool your father when you said, I am your son Esav? Marta. And now you come to claims against me. Why did I trick you? When Yaakov Avinu heard this, he really didn't have anything back to say. So what happens in human nature when someone basically, outstands you, has, you have no argument to say back, you begin to despise them. When this happened, Yaakov Avinu had a vendetta. He began disliking Leah. First, she fooled him, and second, look at this chutzpah. Look what she says back.
Why didn't you divorce her?
Oh, so
You can have an annulment.
their exact relationship and what were the feelings between them, we will soon come to. I just want to finish this point of what happened that night. So, as we know, it says that Leah became pregnant right away with the Bechar, which was Reuven, and it's actually brought down that because of this mistake that Yaakov Avinu was intending for Rachel, he thought that this is Rachel, and then being a different wife, that because of this, Hashem took away certain firstborn rights from Reuven and gave it to Rachel's firstborn, who was Yosef. So, for example, it's brought down that Reuven did not receive a double portion like a Bechar. Also, Reuven did not have a portion in Eretz Yisrael. As we know, he received a portion in Me'aver HaYarden. So even though this was his tribe's desire, but it was already put into their heads and arranged upstairs because they lost the firstborn right. He lost the firstborn right due to his mother's actions because it was not an intended intimacy and therefore it was not an intended pregnancy with her. So there were some repercussions because of this. So how was their relationship? So the Torah itself says, after he married both Rachel and Leah, that Leah got pregnant, and Leah says, Ki snua mechi. Leah testifies about herself that my husband hates me. That's the wording of snua. Is it literal? Is it not literal? We'll see. But one thing's for sure. Throughout the Parsha, each one of Leah's children being born, and there's many of them, the naming of these children is always surrounding the love that she wants her husband to give to her. For example, Reuven. By Reuven, she called her Reuven on the wording of, now my husband will love me. Hashem has seen my pain, that I'm hated. Kisnu Leah. And now my husband will love me. He had a second son named Shimon, and she said, I'm going to call him Shimon because God heard that I am hated. Another son named Levi, I'm going to call him Levi because now my husband will finally be together with me. So we see that there was definitely, from her perspective, she felt some animosity from Yaakov, and as we already explained, for good reason. But there's a halachic problem with a man, with a husband, remaining with his wife if he dislikes her. It's kind of difficult to say. This is called in the Gemara, Nida ben Teisha Midis. The Torah emphasizes that marital intimacy is not just about having children, but it has to be something of with the utmost purity and affection. So because of this, the Mefarshim have a very difficult time accepting that in the literal sense, Leah was hated. And therefore, many Mefarshim explain that this was hated in the sense of comparison to her sister Rachel. As when two wives are married to one husband, then if one wife is favored or loved more than another wife, then the secondary wife will view herself kind of as hated, even though this is a loving relationship. So it's not a real hate. On the other hand, the Medrash Rabbah does take this literally, that he really didn't like her, and he planned to divorce her. He wanted to divorce Leah, and it was only after he found out that she was pregnant, and he knew that this was going to be one of the 12 Shvatim, so therefore he accepted the situation and decided to stay with the marriage. The Alter Rebbe in Torah, we're going to read from it, gives a very interesting Kabbalistic and Chassidic explanation of the difference between the two sisters, what was the exact rivalry between them, and why did Yaakov love Rachel more than Leah. Reading inside from Torah. Rachel and Leah and Rachel spiritually represent the letters of thought and the letters of speech. Shem Alma Diskasya Alma Diskalia, which are the concealed worlds and the revealed worlds. Leah represents the hidden worlds, machshava, abstract, bouncing above reality, while Rachel represents the revealed worlds, speech we can hear what you're saying, thought we don't know, it's concealed. And we're going to explain exactly what this means spiritually, what it means that one represented concealed worlds and thought, and the other represented speech. Rabbi explains like this. Thought, which was represented by Leah, spiritually corresponds to a very high level of divine revelation. A high level of divine revelation that is concealed because it's too powerful, too intense for the worlds to be able to intake, for it to be revealed below. Dibur, which is Rachel, represents a mere glimmer, a much smaller amount of the divine revelation, but an amount that's able to be experienced down here. A person can only experience something on his level. A person that's given something that's too sublime, too lofty for him, that even though it's much higher, much greater than the current information, but he won't understand it. So he'll have absolutely no experience from it, he'll have absolutely no enjoyment from it. So Rachel represents a lower level, which is able to be intaken, is able to be internalized, while Leah represents a much higher level that it's not able to connect. So what ends up being is that Leah is a higher level than Rachel. And Rabbi explains that these two levels that are represented by Leah and Rachel also existed in the times of the temple and today, in times of exile. In the times of the temple, the main level of existence was that of Rachel, meaning that the emphasis then was on a revealed godliness that can be intaken and experienced by the people of the world. And that's why it's brought down in the times of the temple that we saw all these miracles occurring. We had tremendous divine experience. People would come to the temple during the pilgrimage times, the three holidays, and they would have an ecstatic experience like we can only dream about and imagine in connection with God. There was prophecy, there were so many prophets out there, and this is all as a result that there was a lower level of godliness in the air, but available for everyone to grab. In Gullus is considered the Gullus of Rachel. Rachel goes to exile. The level of Rachel is no longer around. So this lower level of revealed godliness that can be experienced by people is no longer found, and that's why we do mitzvahs and we do all these different matters of religious observance, and we don't feel any rush. We don't feel anything when we do it. This is due to the exile of Rachel.
Is that connected with Tikkun Rachel and Tikkun Leah?
Absolutely, yeah, sure. But Leah, says the Alter Rebbe, is around today. Leah was around also in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, but it was concealed. It wasn't available for people. But now that Rachel went, Leah is the level that's available during the times of Gullus, and that's why. So the downside of that is, as I said, we don't have that experience. We don't have the emotional experience of religion as much as we used to, at all, in a comparison level. But in terms of knowledge, what's on a higher level? In other words, that the revelation today of Leah, which is revealed in times of exile, gives us access to the deepest parts of God's wisdom that we didn't have accessible or available during the times of the temple. And that's why we today merited the Torahs of the Arizal, which are great depths of Torah that even in the times of the temple they didn't know. Of Leah, that's available in Eretz Yisrael, and certain unique individuals are able to tap into it. But in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, you wouldn't be able to reach this high level of knowledge. Let's not confuse. This is just knowledge, not experience. Experiencing the knowledge. It's experiencing the knowledge. You talk about malachim, you actually speak to the malachim. You experience the malachim. This is just talking about having knowledge of the different levels, knowledge of the secrets of the world. So this is something that became revealed. Got into some trouble, as we know, and he's trying to fix it. This was his whole purpose. This was his whole laser focus purpose in marrying Rachel. Now, when you balance the two sisters of who to marry to fulfill this purpose, Leah not only doesn't represent it, but represents it. As Leah represents a level of godliness that cannot be experienced in the world, cannot be revealed, cannot be invited. So therefore, he wanted to marry specifically Rachel, who is, yes, a lower level, but a level that can be drawn down and reside within the world for us to experience. In other words, Yaakov Avinu wanted that we don't just have intellectual experience of Judaism, but that we have an emotional connection with God that's felt in a very real way. And this can only be accomplished with Rachel. So therefore, he loved Rachel. He wanted to marry her. This is why, this is the mystical reason of what we mentioned earlier. Why did Yaakov kiss Rachel? This is the mystical reason of why Yaakov kissed Rachel. Yaakov was in essence already beginning that drawing down. Yaakov was beginning the drawing down from his level of Chabad towards her level of Malchus and Spheres. Rachel, which is Dibur, which is godliness below, is the level of kingship, the level of Malchus, while Leah is the level of emotions, Zer Anpin, Zah. And Yaakov Avinu desired to draw that down, and that's drawn down through a zivug of neshikim. In Kabbalah, there's different types of intimate contacts, and one of them is kissing, is considered a very high level of intimacy, and that draws down certain divine revelations. And Yaakov was trying to get this all done. He didn't want to wait. He wanted to try to get this all done already now to draw down the godliness. Being he represented, as we said before, Chabad, and Leah represented, and Rachel represented Malchus. However, with Leah, it never goes down. It never goes into the worlds. It never goes below. Now, to have in the end of this Weimer then connects this with the famous battle, or the famous that in essence what Moshe represented at that time, in times the Meraglim, is the path of Yaakov, is the path of Rachel, while what the Meraglim represented is the path of Leah, which Yaakov despised. Yaakov did not like. How is that? So as we explained, we had a class on this last year, that the Meraglim wanted to not enter Eretz Yisrael so they can sit in the Torah. They can sit in divine service without having to deal with the world in the desert. Well, Moshe Rabbeinu said the whole purpose is to enter Eretz Yisrael, fulfill physical mitzvahs, and draw godliness below. This is exactly the difference between Rachel and Leah. What's the purpose? What's the tachlis? What is our mission and reason of why we're here? Are we here to receive the highest level of intellectual comprehension, the highest level of personal and private divine experience, or are we here to transform the whole world? And being that Rachel represented the latter and Leah represented the former, therefore, it's the pasuk testifies Kisnua Leah, that Leah was hated as she represented the opposite of the purpose of creation, the Kavanas Daramidwa, just like the Meraglim is philosophy, which was holy, was greatly mistaken. So being that this is the case, so why then did Yaakov marry both sisters? Why didn't he? We understand why he wanted Rachel, and we understood why he wanted to marry Rachel no matter what. But why didn't he just divorce Leah? Why did he? So we said before she got pregnant. Is there any deeper of an explanation? So the truth is that you need both of these levels. You need to have the intellectual experience, and you also need to have the emotional experience. And we see this even today in society, that first you spend a number of years in education, which is the level of Leah, not involved in the world. learning in yeshivas, and only afterwards do we get married and go out. So while Leah is not the purpose, and she always wanted to be the purpose, and she was wishing Yaakov Avinu would see her light and come to be with her, but it would never come to that. As while Leah is necessary in Avodas Hashem, the level of Leah, it's not the purpose of it all. The purpose is always to go out and draw down the likus to the world. We're not going to go into what we asked earlier, all the different halachic queries that come up with the fact that Yaakov Avinu was married to two sisters. We are. That's what we're going to go into right now. Yes.
But isn't it a strong word? Hate. You know what I mean?
Right. So we brought earlier the Mefarshim who watered it down and said it's comparative hate. I hear you. You don't like the watered down word.
No, I mean, strong word. You say you need both. You need this kind of.
Right.
So hate is.
So what the way the Alter Rebbe explains it is, and the Alter Rebbe seems like he's going with the literal, that there was literally a natural animosity towards Leah, is because Leah didn't come into the relationship saying, you also need a little bit of Vayetzei, you also need a little bit of learning. I know Rachel's the main thing. She came in saying, no, I am the main thing. So she created a battle. This is similar to why, in the end, we despise the Meraglim. The Meraglim represented something holy, presented something good, but since they wanted to force their way politically, force their way to be accepted, which would be very destructive for the purpose. So that pathway is hated. That direction is hated. And this is what Yaakov did.
I think she had to be. She had to have 6 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was hate. That's very strange. You know what I mean?
Yaakov at first didn't know it would come through her. He wanted them all to come through Rachel. God destined to come through wives in the end, right? But we read before that once he realized that Leah became pregnant, he then didn't hate her anymore. But again, comparatively to Rachel, she felt despised. She felt disliked. Okay. We're going to begin this section of from a halachic perspective, outside of what we just explained now, there was an entire spiritual mission here involved in these marriages, and Yaakov's main goal was Rachel. Once Yaakov Avinu married Leah, he has halachically 2 choices. Wait for Leah to pass away and then marry Rachel, or let her marry Rachel. Those are the only choices he has according to Allah. According to Allah, sister, unless his wife passes away, then it becomes allowed. This is known as one of the Arabas, one of the Arayas that are listed in the Torah. It has a penalty of kares for one who marries 2 sisters. And it's not understood how Yaakov Avinu was able to do this. In fact, the Gemara in Pesachim writes that in the future, it gives us a description of that big banquet we're going to have in the future with the Rabbi and the Shabor, right? The fish and the meat, the famous fish, the famous meat that we've been waiting for, the steaks and the salmons. And in that meal, and of course the aged wine, yain and the so going to be eating, all the Jewish people, sitting and eating by this meal. And one person's going to have to bless Kaishal Bracha. Someone's going to be giving them a Zum, and they're going to get the wine, the cup of wine with the yain and with that aged wine. So who's going to get it? So the Gemara says, at first they give it to Avram Avinu. It was all sitting at the head table. Give it to Avram Avinu. He said, "Why don't you bench?" And Avram Avinu says, "How can I bench? How can Avram Avinu bench? He had Yishmael come out of him. Look what Yishmael did to us. How can he bench? He could be given the honor." They passed the cup to Yitzchak. And Yitzchak also was invalidated. How can Yitzchak bench? Look what came out of him, Esav. And then they gave it to Yaakov, and now everyone's whispering, they can't say anything bad about this. He had 12 righteous sons. He had, mitasi shleiva bachish ba'avis. And then the word gets out, he married 2 sisters. Went against the Torah. How can you give cover to a man who marries 2 sisters? Goes against the law of the Torah, a negative command of the Torah. And there went the cover until this line, until it reached the Melech, who finally benched us. So we see that this marriage of Yaakov. No, David, that's a son. It's a son. No. David HaMelech didn't have 1,000 wives. Yeah.
It's not perfect. It's over there.
So? So the question is, so we see that this thing had a negative effect. We see that there was something wrong with the relationship. And certainly there was, as according to Torah, it's forbidden. Now, obviously, we know that the Torah wasn't yet given and the 613 commands were not yet in effect. This is before Matan Torah. There's a reason why we had Matan Torah that obligates now the Jewish people in being observant. This is before Matan Torah. Nonetheless, even though this was all before Matan Torah, as we know, the Avis kept all the Torah even before it was given, as it says, right, regarding Avram Avinu, that he guarded even the rabbinical commands and that he taught it to his son Yitzchak and his son Yitzchak, his son Yaakov. Yaakov was in yeshiva for 14 years. Well, he never learned this puzzle. He never learned this information. 14 years in yeshiva. So there must be some other reason, but they definitely were observant, and as it says that they were even Rosh Yeshivas later on. So they definitely were informed of this, and they definitely tried to keep all the Torah mitzvahs, and even furthermore, Yaakov Avinu himself davened in this week's Parsha in the beginning to God, please save me from Lavan, both truly that I should stay observant, that I should stay in my level of holiness. And what does it say in Parsha Vayishlach? He sends a message to Esav, his brother, in Lavan Garti, I guarded all the 613 mitzvahs. Here's a man who's coming with 2 sisters as wives, really 4, by the way, the one's up as well. Okay, he's coming with 4 siblings that he's married to, and he boasts to Esav, oh, I kept all the 613 commands. How did you keep the 613 commands? You transgressed in this occurrence. So we're going to go through many, many different Mefarshim who deal with this question. They're all bothered by how does this happen. The Ramban al Torah says, to answer this question, Sha'aves kimu es kol Torah kula rak be'eretz Yisrael. When does it say that they were Rosh Yeshivas and they did all the mitzvahs and even the rabbinical ones? Only in Eretz Yisrael. But when they went to Chutz La'aretz, then it was a free-for-all. No one should get any ideas from this, by the way, okay? This was all before Matan Torah. And maybe this is where it's from, you go on vacation, you leave religion behind for a few days. Learn from Yaakov Avinu, only in Eretz Yisrael, and left Eretz Yisrael. But before Matan Torah, when they accepted their chumrah of keeping all the mitzvahs, they weren't obligated, and it was only in the land of Israel they accepted it, but in Haran they didn't. And therefore, he was allowed to marry 2 sisters. Now, what the Ramban points out that this makes sense with is that what happened as soon as they returned to Eretz Yisrael, Rachel passes away. So he was actually never married to 2 sisters in the land of Israel where he keeps the Torah mitzvahs. Right, we'll deal with them another time. We'll deal with them later. Right now, all the answers, only answering for Rachel and Leah. Bill and Zilpah is a totally another story, which very interestingly somehow escaped the Mefarshim here. They don't discuss them, but we will, at the end, we will also discuss Bill and Zilpah. Another answer that's given. The Das Kanim. The Das Kanim says, he explains like this, that although the others kept the Torah, they didn't mean that they kept everything to the exact T. There were some times that they felt it was necessary for different reasons to break the laws. They didn't accept it upon themselves as a, that as a chumrah that will break any other avenue, any other option. And therefore, they basically accept it as a chumrah when viable, when possible. But if it's not possible, and here Yaakov really wanted to marry Rachel, as we. So therefore, he decided to forego this chumrah. So, Ladas Canaan.
What's going on there?
Well, before Matan Torah, yeah, you had the, yeah, it's true. Before Matan Torah, you can be conservative. Yeah, before.
They could say that before Matan Torah, I live my life now.
The Chizkuni gives us two options of an answer. The first answer that he says is as follows: Rachel v'Leah hayu nachrius. In Ken Kishnisu Yaakov and his Gaira. Rachel and Leah were both shiksas, goyas, not Jewish, if there was such a concept back then. And therefore, in order for them to marry Yaakov, they had to go through a conversion. What does this mean? Avram Avinu, as you know, was the first Jew. He inherited that Jewishness, that Jewish identity, the son Yitzchak. Yitzchak inherited it to Yaakov. Anybody who would marry Yaakov or marry Yaakov's children, the Shvatim, would have to go through a type of conversion, just like today we have conversion after Matan Torah. So to back then, it would have to be a conversion to bring them into the Jewish ethnicity. And being that we have a rule, Katan Shanoilad Dami, that a person who converts is considered like a reborn person, a reborn individual. Therefore, it was considered as if, due to their reborn status, that they are really not sisters. And we find this halacha even today. If a family of Goyim convert and become Gerei Tzedek, from the letter of the law, according to biblical status, according to biblical law, it's permitted for any Jew to marry two women in those families, whether it's a mother and daughter, or a sister, two sisters. They have no relations. In fact, it's even mutter for the father to marry one of his relatives, or the sister to marry one of her relatives.
Like a sister and brother could get married?
Correct. From a biblical perspective, there's no incest. They're completely new people. Not just new souls, they're also new bodies. They're considered new.
That's so cool.
They're considered new to the point, obviously we know they're considered new from the aspect they received a new neshama, they now have a godly soul. But the idea here is that, let's go back a little bit. Gentiles also have to keep certain laws of relations, of intimacy, of marriage, as part of Shavuos Mitzvah B'nai Noach. One of them is that a father, although a father could technically marry a daughter, but accepted upon themselves not to, so they cannot marry their daughter. A father cannot marry a daughter. And a mother cannot marry a son. And a sister may not marry a brother if it's paternal. So the idea is that how is it possible that if they're Goyim, they can't get married. If they're Jews, they can't get married. If they make the transfer, then they could get married to each other. How does that happen? And this is what Chazal come and say, that they considered as if they were just born right now. And they are considered a new birth. And therefore, their biological relation that they share is no longer of spiritual effectiveness to prohibit incest. In other words, when the Torah prohibited all the arayas, what's the reason behind the prohibition of arayas, of the forbidden relations of incest? So the common answer that people say is, oh, it's disgusting. Well, it's only disgusting because the Chazal took away the Yetzer Hara for it. If you go back 2,000 years ago, nobody thought it was disgusting. Chazal wouldn't have taken, Sanhedrin wouldn't have stabbed out the eye of the Yetzer Hara, as it was back then. There was a lust for these things. Furthermore, some people say it's because that the children, the offspring, will be damaged, will come out mutated, will come out with different illnesses, which is true. But that is not the reason that the Torah prohibited it. As amongst these relations, there are relations that there will be nothing wrong with the child. There's certain one of their rights that they're not biologically related. A mother-in-law and a son-in-law, they're not biologically related. A person to marry a mother and a daughter, not biologically related. Or two sisters, what on earth would one affect the other? So there are other reasons mentioned here. The reasons it's brought in Kabbalah is because intimacy that happens below creates intimacy above. Non-kosher intimacy below creates non-kosher yichudim above, creates non-kosher unifications above in the upper worlds. And the same way we cannot mix meat and milk together, and we cannot mix wool and linen together, we also can't mix certain relations together, as that causes those mixtures to happen upstairs, and it's like kilayim, and it causes a confusion in the upper worlds that God does not want to happen. When the family converts to Judaism, that ability to make that confusion upstairs is lost. They no longer have that correspondence anymore, brother and sister, or sister and sister, to then, when they get married, it will affect upstairs in the upper worlds. So that's why after marriage they consider Katan Shaladim, to the point that from a biblical, again, I'm emphasizing from a biblical perspective, they would be allowed to get married. Yes, Chachamim decreed against it because they say, first, number one, a person may convert just for this reason. Number two, people will say, what, as a Goy was forbidden, as a Jew it's permitted, so when you go to Judaism you get less work. So these are the reasons brought down in the Gemara and in the Talmud, in the Shulchan Aruch, of why the Chachamim placed they placed their decree forbidding it to be done. But for biblically it's permitted. There's a story with the Rebbe that he once took this to a very interesting place, this idea of Katan Shanei Ladami. It was a ger tzedek, who before he converted, he was obviously a guy. He was a Gentile living in Chicago. His father-in-law was Jewish. His wife is Jewish, but he was not Jewish. And his father-in-law was very, very anti-Orthodox, very, very anti-religious. And he, was so happy when his daughter, a nice Jewish girl, got married to a Shagitz. You couldn't have been more happy than that. It gave him such nachas. And now when he started hearing his son is looking into Judaism, it was, it broke his whole world. And this individual went ahead and at first converted through reform and realized that it's just a bunch of, it's fake. Then he wanted to do through conservative. He went to Rabbi Schusterman in Chicago. Rabbi Schusterman at first, as the halacha is, you don't accept gerim with an open hand. Someone who wants to convert, you try to push them off to see if they're really, really interested. And in the end of the day is that this individual, who's still a guy, prior to conversion, wrote to the Rebbe and told the Rebbe that he's having difficulty with his emissary in Chicago, Rabbi Schusterman, who's refusing to invite him and refusing to entertain the notion of his conversion. And he wants to go through, and he's asking if the Rebbe can tell him, his emissary, to help him with the process. At the same time, while he was trying to convert, he was diagnosed with Yenamach. He was diagnosed with cancer. And the doctors gave him very little time to live, and he really wanted to die a Jew. So he added this in the letter to the Rebbe. So this is the reason why it's very urgent and very important for this to get done right away. And I'll listen to the end. The Rebbe wrote him back the letter, and we have the letter. The letter is printed. The Rebbe wrote to him in this letter that, the importance of going through an Orthodox conversion, and in the end, he did go through an Orthodox conversion, Rabbi Schusterman, but he wrote him in this letter that since when a person converts, he's like a Katan Shnei Ladami, it's not only in the soul, but also in the body, and therefore, the cancer will no longer be relevant once you convert. This person's alive till today. This story happened years ago. So, the Chizkuni, Kekatan Shnei Ladami, they're no longer relatives. The problem, though, with this answer is the following. First, number one, the Chachamim decree. You got out of the biblical problem, you're still in the rabbinical problem. So Yaakov Avinu is still not, following the laws. Number two, one of the reasons recorded why the Torah prohibited marrying two sisters, and it's one of the arayos, is because the Torah did not desire there to be enmity, which there naturally is between co-wives, sister wives, between siblings. Torah did not desire that two siblings will dislike each other, will start entering into this competition. And therefore the Torah prohibited it. Based on that reason does not change after you convert. The sisters still have that biological connection. They're still family, and they will now be despising each other. And therefore, even if you can say from the letter of the law the Isser doesn't apply, from the spirit of the law, it should apply in this case. So this is one of the issues that we have with this answer. Another attempted answer that Chizkuni gives is the following. Leah and Rachel were not twins. In fact, they didn't even have the same biological mother. Lavan had many wives. Rachel was born from one, and Leah was born from another. Leah, the older one. Now, since they were not maternal siblings, but rather paternal, and by Goyim, it's as follows. By the relations of Goyim, we follow the father. So a paternal sister cannot marry a brother and sister, which are siblings paternally, cannot marry each other. Maternally, yes, paternally, no. But from a Jew's perspective, as a Jew, we don't consider the father's offspring, we don't consider yichus from the father's side. So Yaakov, being a Jew, says this Chizkuni, when he sees Rachel and Leah, since they share the father, but they have different mothers, and we don't view paternity of a Gentile as lineage, it's as if they don't have the same father. It's a stretch. It's a stretch. But this is another attempted answer, and therefore he was allowed to marry them. When you go to yeshiva for 14 years, these are things you start coming up with. You learn Gemara, you begin getting a very intellectual mind. Yaakov Ruveni brings an interesting approach, and he says the following. Yaakov Avinu never decided to marry two sisters. It was a matter of fact. It just happened. How? You see, when he worked for Rachel for 7 years, that was the Kedushin money that he gave her father, Lavan. And in Kedushin, when the father receives money to betroth his daughter, the daughter's married. So in essence, Rachel was already betrothed to Yaakov throughout the entire 7 years. Wow. Or at the conclusion of the 7 years, but before the wedding. So he was already married to Rachel. They just didn't do the nesuin. They didn't do the next step. So when now Leah came in and he married Leah, it was already a matter of fact. He didn't have a choice to make a decision anymore. Now you can say that once he already was forced in the situation, he's not going to be machmer to the expense of divorcing somebody. Another approach that's given based on Sifrei Kabbalah and Yaakov Ruveni is that this was coming to fulfill a very old tikkun from the beginning of creation. Remember good old Cain and Hevel? Cain and Hevel got into a little fight on their first day on earth, and Cain killed Hevel. One of the reasons it's brought down that Cain killed Hevel is because Cain was born with one sister who he married, and Hevel was born with two sisters. He was jealous. He wanted two as well. Hevel was killed. Hevel never got to marry the two sisters. Says the Yaakov Ruveni that Yaakov Avinu was a Gilgal of Hevel, and the two sisters, his two twins, were Rachel and Leah. So he's coming here to complete a picture that was supposed to be done in the beginning of creation, but Cain messed things up.
Is he aware of this?
If I'm aware of it, I'm sure he was.
And supposedly, the yeshiva was a field full of Yaakov and Machal.
Right.
Well,
The Rebbe's answer. So famously, the Rebbe here has a very interesting approach, a very shot approach, from which the Rebbe derives a very important lesson. With all the answers that we gave, there are certain issues. Because at the end of the day, no matter how you say it, either biblically or rabbinically, there was something wrong going on here. So, the answer of saying, "Oh, only in Israel I keep religion," that doesn't work. The answer of saying that they converted, we already said, okay, so there's still an Issa D'Rabbanan. So what if they converted? How does that take care of the rabbinical prohibition? The fact that they're Gulgulim, the whole world not going to start doing Averis and start saying, oh, it's Gulgulim, it's this, people do this, unfortunately. They do sins, and that was for the sake of going to Shabtai Tzvi. It was very famous, involved in doing sins for the sake of different tikkunim and Gulgulim and cause terrible things. So all these answers that we gave have some kind of issues with them. So we're going to now read what the Rebbe answers. Where is it? Okay. Hezber Nasav Binyan Zehu. Kabbalah Sa'avis al Atzmin Lishmer Eskola Teri Lefnei Shenisna Haisa Kamala Il Chumra Vahi Safa Vitzit. The fact that the Avis kept the Torah, we all agree was not obligatory. It was a stringency and an act of scrupulousness that they took upon themselves due to their righteousness. This is considered a great merit on their behalf. It's understood that being that that's the case, that is the status of the mitzvahs they kept before Matan Torah. So therefore, if there ended up being a collision between something they were commanded to do and a chumrah that they desired to keep, due to keeping one of the 613 mitzvahs, they would have to let go, they would have to ignore the mitzvah in order to keep what they are obligated to keep. In other words, let's just give an example. If Yitzchak Avinu would tell Yaakov, can you please bring me a cup of milk? And Yaakov says back to Yitzchak, but father, you just ate fleshik, how can you drink milk? You have to wait 6 hours. He can't do that, because right now he has a chiyuv deraisa kibbut avei, which is, even for Ben Noach, many opinions say that it's a mitzvah sesek. While not drinking milk within 6 hours of meat, first of all, Minadin is only the Sfardim, and we all know Yitzchak is Ashkenazi. Right? Number two.
They read 1 hour.
Number two, it's again before Matan Torah, it's a chumrah. So when you have a collision between something that right now they are obligated to keep as goyim, as bnei noach, versus a chumrah, a scrupulousness that they have the choice of keeping and they're just doing out of hiddur, then they obviously have to give up the hiddur for the sake of fulfilling their obligations. It's obvious that a obligatory matter cannot push aside a matter of hiddur cannot push aside an obligatory matter. This is the simple reason, without going into anything too deep. Avram Avinu didn't do the bris milah till he was 99 years old. Many Farshim deal with this as well. The highest mitzvah he doesn't keep, as the Moshe is b'kach. And the reason is because there is a prohibition of 7 Noahide laws to injure yourself. It's a prohibition. It says, from Parshas Noach. So how can he go ahead and injure himself when it's against 7 Noahide laws? You're right, it's a great mitzvah, bismillah, but he wasn't commanded yet. So you can't do a chumrah on the expense of an obligation. And the same thing happened in this case as well. Yaakov Avinu is not allowed to go ahead and keep a stringency of the Torah if it's going to come at the expense of an obligation. So what stringency are we referring to here? What obligation are we referring to that Yaakov was entering a collision course with if he wouldn't have married Rachel and Leah? So let's see. One of the good actions that the nations accepted upon themselves, to abstain from tricking each other, from scamming